In this edition of The Color Between the Lines, I'm speaking with an author by the name of Jor-El Carabello. He has a new audiobook called Meditations for Black Men. Caraballo is a licensed therapist who is also the co-founder of a company called Viva, a multi-state mental health practice. He has a BA in psychology from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, as well as degrees in psychological counseling from Teachers College at Columbia University. He's not only a therapist, but he's also a Afro-Latino who brings a different perspective to being a therapist, as well as talks about his own personal journey through mental health. I hope you enjoy it. I know I did. Most people who go into this profession that you are in, that I have spoken with and interviewed, they kind of were called into service for have a personal story. And is there a personal story that kind of led you into this field?
Yes and no, maybe in an unexpected way. I think that a lot of people come to therapy and counseling as providers themselves from being clients first, or struggling with certain things in their life before then, and that wasn't necessarily my experience. I actually came to psychology from having an interest in people. I grew up as a very sensitive, a highly sensitive person. I self-ascribed that identity. I was always a very sensitive kid. I was a young Black boy in the South with feelings, which like posed some challenges. But, it wasn't until I came to take an intro to psychology course where I was met with like an instructor who I just really liked. And she was a social worker by trade, and she was teaching as a part of that. And what I noticed was she was authentically herself, and I was really drawn to that. And so I thought, I had family, working in healthcare, and I had that sort of background. But here I found someone who was authentically themselves and was able to help people. So it's like this beautiful merge of like a possibility of like, well, I can be myself. I can be sensitive as a man. I can be empathetic. I can be a little funny and humorous, and I can be there to support people using like these really awesome skills, in which I think, our minds, our psyches are like the universe within us. And so there's endless things to look at. And I love a good mystery. I love a good puzzle. And so it's like all these mergings coming together. I was like, okay, this is what makes sense for me. And that's how I started on the path. And I was decided from that day on.
You speak about mind, body, and spirit in this book. And one thing that kind of stood out for me, I remember you talking about Black men and having a kind of a sort of strained relationship with their own bodies. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about why you said that and what you're trying to address in the book when you talk about Black men and their relationship with their own bodies.
Yeah. Do we have 3 days to tell? Because there's a lot there. Um, One of the things I bring up in Meditations for Black Men, first and foremost, is especially in the West, how insidious colonization and slavery has been for colonizing not only the land, but also our minds and psyches.
Hmm.
Right. And so we come from this having, at least in part, right, in modern history, this relationship to the Black male body in particular is being a source of strength, and its ability to withstand trauma is its fortune. This is what makes you valuable. It's literally what made you valuable, what made our ancestors valuable at a certain point in time, right? And so one of the questions I always raise is like, to what extent have we just continued that line of thinking because we've left it unchallenged, right? That what I have to offer in my body, what my body has to offer in this world is hyperproductivity, is brute strength, ability to withstand trauma, and to always deliver and to only protect, right? That, sure, those are great. That's one side of humanity. Where's the rest of our humanity, right? We need other things. We need touch that is non-sexual. We need affection. We need to be able to rest. We need to be able to be in our bodies and feel safe within our bodies as much as we can in a world that's, really challenged by us because of their own beliefs. And so yeah, and then we also talk about like romantic relationships and how we express ourselves, right, physically with partners and intimacy, the whole other can of worms of how we see ourselves and what we pride ourselves on, and starting to deconstruct those ideas and reimagine them, I think is what meditations aims to do, at least in part.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to that particular subject, because I think that, like you said, there's such a big, long history, especially for African American men. And you also mentioned in your book a lot of different things in terms of how, I guess, ethnicities, in my opinion, I believe Black men have a lot more things that they kind of have to deal with than perhaps other ethnicities in American society because just of how they're viewed. And I wondered how your book addresses some of those things, not just in the body, but in the mind and the spirit when you're talking about when you address those things in the book.
Yeah. And I also come to this work as a Black man of Puerto Rican descent as well, right? So obviously my name is what it is. That
Yes.
those are also my people, right? And so I understand sort of how my identity and positionality socially is also impacted by my ethnicity, that real or perceived, right? But first and foremost, I'm a Black man. I grew up in this world as a Black man, and people see me as a Black man. And so that's where I start from with this work. And so I think challenging the ideas around like ethnicity and race, I think is about us, one, just starting to recognize and acknowledge what the scene is, like the world in which we exist, sort of acknowledging now in 2024 and thereafter, how do people see us? What are those stereotypes? What are things that people project onto us? What are things that people ignore or invalidate about us? And then the meditations, especially like redefining masculinity and thinking about in the spirit section as well, is sort of giving Black men the permission to say, all right, I experience things in this world. There are all these ideas about who I am, but who do I think I am? Who are we? Right? And giving us the permission to ask that question and have the freedom to answer it for ourselves, and then start to figure out, this is how I extend this outward. I can think about how I want to extend my Black masculinity outward. I can think how I want to embrace community and spirituality outward, but I have to start with myself first without all the noise.
Do you believe that something like this, because for some people, it might be intimidating to do some of these meditations if they've never done meditating or anything like that. And I know that some people have that misperception that meditation is supposed to be a religious thing, and you make it very abundantly clear that it's not. So getting those people to pick up that book, maybe it might be better in a, I don't know, like a group setting, or what would you suggest where these might fit easier for somebody who might be intimidated by even just trying it at all?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because that was in the development of the project. That was something we were very conscious of, something I was very conscious of. Especially, I come from an area where meditation doesn't it really exist. At least not when I was growing up. It wasn't a word I'd ever heard really. We only had prayer, right? This was how you sort of connect to spirit. And so, to me, it is so what I've done in the construction of the book is to support that person who is just arriving, right? It's in the order of how we did things. It's why we start with body. It's usually the easiest and most accessible. It's the least threatening idea wise. Just like, okay, be with yourself in your body. Let's start there and just get familiar with the practice of being in presence, right? And each section, body, mind, and spirit, also has a variety of length of meditations as well. So we start off with very short ones, 3 to 5 minutes, which still may be long for the very novice person, and that's okay, right? But then the meditations build with longer times and in deeper content as you go throughout the section. And so, you might have someone who says, I want to try this, body scan meditation, and that's all I can tolerate. I just want to get good at that and present with that. Maybe I do that 10 times before I move on to the longer mindful breathing meditation and connecting with myself in that way. So we leave room for people to experience this in the way that works for them. And I obviously encourage people to share this with other people in their lives, maybe even do it together in groups. And maybe that's something I'll also end up doing one day. We'll see.
Final, well, I shouldn't say final question, because I wondered when you were writing this, because usually when people are writing a book or putting together something, a project like this, they often have parts which are a challenge for them personally. Was there any part of this that challenged you when you were trying to get it done?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I think probably the meditation that I had the hardest time with, it was both like personal and professional, was the healing a parental wound. Right? It's like, and I see clients and we talk about this in our work together, but it's also my experience is that when we start to think about exploring our relationship with our parents, no matter what challenges we faced, there's a natural tendency to be very protective, to really sort of protect them, even from like an unknown outside force. Like, no, 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 like everything was good. I had the best childhood, yada, yada, yada. So there's that impulse there that we contend with. And it was something we actually talked with the editors about a great deal about, okay, where's the line in which we give people permission to acknowledge, knowing that there's that barrier that most of us have on some level, but then, sort of recognizing that, especially as a therapist and someone who's done my own work, right? And, both with family and other things, it's just, we need permission to go there. And so what if this meditation is the first time that someone allows themselves to go there and really acknowledge what has happened in a relationship with a parent? Like, wouldn't that be really important and special? And so that kind of gave me the courage to sort of like push through that and say, okay, like this needs to exist. It will be a little hard, but this space needs to exist for people, even if they don't have access to therapy or don't feel like therapy is right for them. Where can we create that? And so that's what we ended up with.
And this is the final question. What do you hope that folks who pick up the book, that they really come away with that nugget that you really want them to feel and understand?
I think I really want Black men to know that they matter, first and foremost, that, our lives, our minds, our hearts, our spirits are worthy, and we are worthy of taking care of them and honoring those parts of us. And my hope is that anyone who comes across this feels that in their experience, and then can also share that with other Black men in their life, to help them have that same experience and feeling.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the BIM.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this edition of The Color Between the Lines. The audiobook is called Meditations for Black Men. I'm Esther Dillard.